Milk?
No, thank you, sir.
Sugar?
Why are you stalling, Captain?
I don't want the game to end.
Hello everyone and welcome to Sci-Fi Q. My name is Byron and I'd like to do a little review and discussion of the premiere episode of the new series Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Picard premiered on CBS All Access, streaming only, last Thursday at 12 a.m. Pacific Time, and I am not even one tiny bit ashamed to admit that I waited up until 3 a.m. here on the East Coast so I could watch it right away. There were several things immediately apparent about this latest entry in producer Alex Kurtzman's big new Star Trek television universe. 1. No expense will be spared in bringing Jean-Luc Picard back to television. The show looks and sounds beautiful, showcasing the more cinematic 2.4:1 or CinemaScope aspect ratio of Star Trek Discovery over the more traditional 16:9 or 2:1 aspect ratio of other series. The color palette is warm and vibrant, eschewing Discovery's obsession with drab grays and blues. The visual effects are all seemingly top-notch, and the title theme by Discovery's composer Jeff Russo, although a bit more restrained than the bombastic fanfares that Trek has preferred in the past, is lovely. 2. Sir Patrick Stewart has never been in finer form as an actor, delivering a new version of Picard that is far less enthusiastic or optimistic than we last saw, but managing to do so with the same heart and warmth we've come to expect. Picard may be grumpy and disturbed in this series, but he's still Picard. 3. Overall, the writing seems quite good, with an opening scene between Picard and Data especially poignant and pregnant with double meanings. And Kurtzman wasn't kidding when he said the show would enjoy taking its time. This episode sets up the story well at, shall we say, a luxurious pace, but for me this was not to its detriment. From this moment onward, basically everything in this video is going to be a spoiler of some sort, either something I'm saying or something I'm showing you, so if you have still not seen the first episode of this series, you might want to click away now. If you have seen the episode but you just don't want to sit through a summary and want to skip to my conclusions, you can skip to the time that's posted on the screen right now. Shortly into this pilot, entitled Remembrance, we learn why Picard left Starfleet. The year is 2399, and after awaking from a lovely but somehow not quite right dream in which he was playing poker with Commander Data on the Enterprise D, we see that Picard is living out a somewhat humdrum life on Chateau Picard, the vineyard that was at one time run by his brother Robert and seen in the Next Generation episode, Family. He's living there with a pit bull named Number One and 2 Romulan friends who help him to run the vineyard and are apparently sort of taking care of the aging admiral. It's a big day for Picard as he's preparing to be interviewed on the Federation News Network. The interview does not quite go as planned as the woman interviewing Picard strays from the agreement and asks him why he left Starfleet, even though she had agreed not to bring up the subject. During the interview, Picard describes the events from 14 years earlier surrounding the destruction of Romulus as a result of a shockwave from a supernova first described in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek in 2009. In anticipation of that looming disaster, Picard was leading a massive rescue effort for all affected Romulans. Political support for this operation was lean, however, and the interviewer makes it clear that public opinion hasn't changed much in the years since. Implying that a rescue effort for over 900 million Romulans was simply too massive an operation to be feasible, she compares the operation to the building of the Egyptian pyramids. Picard counters that a better analog would be Dunkirk, referring to the 1940 evacuation of over 330,000 Allied soldiers from the beaches of Dunkirk in France during World War II. In spite of the lack of public support, however, the project did in fact go forward, or at least it started to. And then tragedy struck in the form of a devastating attack on the Utopia Planitia shipyards on Mars by a group of either malfunctioning or simply deviant synthetic life forms referred to in the episode repeatedly as simply, quote, rogue synths. The synth attack left 92,000 innocent residents and workers dead, while the installation was busy manufacturing the fleet that was to be dispatched to aid the Romulans. The result of this event was that the Federation decided to pull out of the rescue efforts in light of the new danger posed by synths and to put their own welfare first, popular opinion leaning heavily against leveraging precious Federation resources to the massive operation, leaving the Romulans to fend for themselves. Soon thereafter, all synthetic life was banned. This meant the dismantling of B4, a rudimentary prototype for Commander Data from Star Trek Nemesis, and a halt to all research into synthetic life. In response to the Federation hightailing out of danger and leaving the Romulans without the aid they'd been promised, compounded by its hasty ban on synthetic life, Admiral Jean-Luc Picard put his career on the line and threatened his resignation. Starfleet called his bluff, and he was out. I gotta pause here for a second just to say, this scene gave me goosebumps. Quite frankly, this could be Sir Patrick's Emmy clip. Stewart's grasp on this man and his moral center is so strong, and we feel his outrage with every breath. He makes the entire ordeal new again for Picard, and the inane posturing of the journalist interviewing him only adds fuel to the fire on a truly great scene. But that's all in the past, and what sets Picard off on his new journey concerns what happens in the present, or the year 2399. In a very cool and rare glimpse of futuristic Boston, a young civilian woman and her boyfriend are viciously attacked by masked operatives, and her boyfriend is killed just before one of the operatives declares fearfully to his comrades that she has, quote, activated, and the young woman, even while blinded by a black hood that's been tied over her head, makes quick work of killing every one of her attackers before returning to her previous state and viewing the carnage with shock and horror. One cool takeaway from this scene is that her boyfriend is Zahian, a race originally created for Star Trek Discovery, so it's nice to see the two shows coming together in one universe. Moments later, she sees a vision of Picard that she can't explain, and after matching the name to the face when she sees his interview on FNN, she sets out in search of him. When she finds him, we learn that her name is Daj, and after she explains the situation, she is assured safety at Chateau Picard. The next day, Picard identifies Daj as the young woman depicted by Commander Data in a painting he gifted to the then captain 30 years earlier, a painting Data entitled Daughter. Picard tells Daj he believes she was in some way fashioned from Data's memories of the painting and is, in fact, synthetic. Unfortunately, Daj is killed by the operatives that have been chasing her soon thereafter, and the brief look we get at her destruction does seem to support the idea that she was not, at least entirely, human. You can't really see it in these still images, but after Daj is attacked with acid of some sort, her skin starts to sort of flake apart and float up into the air in a very odd, very unusual way. For me, this led credence to the idea that she may have been only partially human and partially not human. Some sort of cyborg, perhaps. In fact, the effect sort of reminded me of what happened to the Borg Queen at the end of Star Trek First Contact. Picard then visits a scientist named Dr. Agnes Jurati at the Daystrom Institute near the conclusion of the episode to inquire about the possibility that Daj might somehow have been a sentient synthetic life form based on the memories of Commander Data, and although the technology is considered centuries away, Dr. Jurati confirms that such a thing might be possible based on the research of her colleague, Dr. Bruce Maddox. Maddox was the overzealous scientist featured in the TNG episode Measure of a Man. Dr. Jurati further reveals that according to Maddox's research, if Daj truly was what Picard believes her to have been, she would have been made alongside a twin. Dr. Maddox's location, however, is unknown, as he went into seclusion after his research was officially shut down by Starfleet. Lastly, we see Daj's twin, whose name is Soji, conversing with a young man named Narek on what is being called a Romulan reclamation site. The episode's last lofty moment reveals that the site has been constructed within the ruins of an old Borg cube. And that really drives home the new landscape of the Alpha Quadrant in a world after the destruction of Romulus and after the apparent destruction of the Borg. A world in which the Romulans are forced to start living in the abandoned shells of Borg vessels just to have somewhere to be. It's a very bleak picture, and yet, considering the amount of Borg-related footage we keep seeing in trailers, it's still difficult to believe that the Borg are actually entirely gone for good. But I digress, and this show is almost certainly not about the Borg. Or is it? Well, only time will tell, but now it's time to dive into some analysis and actual review of the episode. Overwhelmingly, I really enjoyed this first episode of this amazing new show that we were all looking forward to for so long, and I'm so glad it's finally here. Star Trek Picard is clearly very well produced, the story thus far is intriguing, and with mountains of exposition finally out of the way, it's safe to assume that future episodes will move a bit more briskly. As a longtime Star Trek fan, I can't tell you how excited I was for this show to finally come around, and now it's finally here. The story does seem rather fragmented at this point, but some of that can be attributed to the requisite setting up of story elements and characters that tends to weigh down all series pilots. I must say also that I'm pleased the show is jumping off from the very last Prime Universe events we know of, as depicted in flashback during J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek reboot, and which specifically relate to the destruction of Romulus. It can be frustrating when a long-running series of films or television series choose to retcon specific episodes or films from existence, and considering that the story of the Romulan supernova in particular was delivered by Leonard Nimoy himself as Prime Spock in the 2009 film, it's all the more appropriate, in my opinion, to honor those words as canon. The most interesting takeaway from this episode, for me, however, relates not to character, production design, or even story, but to tone. The tone of Star Trek Picard is decidedly darker than anything seen during TNG, and certainly darker than Voyager. There is some credence to the idea that it, quote, feels like DS9, as stated by Jake Sisko actor Sir Glofton in his review, but even DS9 was not this bleak. This show takes place in a world where the Federation is not only distrusted by our mortal enemies, or even the commanders of space stations out on the front lines during war, but in which even seasoned veterans of the fleet, themselves stalwart proponents of Starfleet's mission in supporting and defending the ideals of that Federation, are feeling disillusioned as well. We see a civilian woman who appears to be an intelligent and thoughtful woman outright diminish the significance of saving lives if those lives are Romulan. And we see one of our greatest heroes rolling around in the mud of resentment and, quote, nursing his offended dignity for decades. This is a world in which millions were left to either die or struggle to survive after the destruction of their homeworld because the Federation just gave up on a plan to save them. It's a depressing premise in some ways, but one can only assume there is a method to this somewhat anti-Roddenberryan madness. As with STP's immediate predecessor on CBS All Access, Star Trek Discovery, it occurs to me that the showrunners and Alex Kurtzman, along with the input and guidance of Sir Patrick Stewart himself, may be playing a long game with our perceptions of Trek and the ideals of the franchise, in a way reminiscent of how Discovery challenged fans to appreciate those ideals once again by way of seeing a world without them. That these observations may very well be rooted in some very contemporary 2020 politics is a fact that is probably indisputable, no matter how uncomfortable some fans may be with the fact that Trek has always commented on the state of modern society. I suspect there's more of that kind of writing to come in future episodes, and I can't wait to see how the showrunners navigate telling that story and weaving that allegory together while attending to the reputation of one of Star Trek's most beloved characters. I plan to expand on this idea of a thematic tie-in between Discovery and Picard in a future video, but for the moment I'll leave further analysis and just sum up my feelings about not only this episode, Remembrance, but this whole brand new series. Star Trek Picard is a beautifully filmed, wonderfully produced work of television. Frankly, it feels more like a film than a TV show. The acting and writing are extremely compelling, and it is most certainly going boldly in a direction we've not seen Trek go before. I appreciated the detailed touches present in Picard's dreams of Commander Data, the nuances with which the writers and director have painted this new iteration of Jean-Luc Picard, and lastly, I adore the free rein that has been afforded to Patrick Stewart in pursuing this exciting new direction. I'll leave all the nitpicking to others on YouTube, but for a pilot episode, in my opinion, this was tops. Thanks everybody for joining me here on Sci-Fi Q. If you liked this video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button, as that helps me out a lot more than you'd think and encourages me to keep producing stuff. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, by all means subscribe to the channel, because that'll help even more. Until next time, thanks once again for being here, and have a great day.